Welcome everyone to Cyber Judo. I'm your host, Christian Scott with Tantalum Security. This week, we are going to be starting a very special series lined up for our listeners in the domain of AI in the crossroads of security, compliance, and governance. I'm going to be hosting this series with my compliance bestie, Pat here, who leads up the team at Active Compliance and Ethics Group. And this webcast series is going to take place every other week. It's going to be about 6 sessions, and we're going to walk through the entire AI adoption process and roadmap. Now, each session will be about 45 minutes long, plus or minus, including addressing folks' questions real time in the chat below. So certainly, if you're joining via YouTube Live or LinkedIn Live, do not hesitate to drop in any questions, thoughts, ideas you guys have, and we'll certainly include that in the conversation here and in the webcast series here. The insights that we're looking to provide in these sessions are not hypothetical, but real world from our experiences, helping organizations build and scale well-governance AI programs. When it comes to organizations, they can all go from size of being somewhere it's a small mom and pop shop or a family office all the way up to an enterprise with thousands of employees. But nonetheless, wherever you fit, we feel that a lot of these tips, tricks, and insights will help you be able to build your AI security program, your compliance program, and your governance program. That being all noted, Pat's the yin to my yang, where we'll be focusing where I'll be focusing a little bit more on the technical components and the cybersecurity elements, where Pat will be bringing his compliance and governance expertise into the conversation and helping organizations and teams understand how AI adoption is not just a technical aspect or an IT aspect, but also a cultural aspect for organizations as well. That being said, Pat, why don't you take 1 minute to provide a little bit more details about yourself for the listeners here?
Well, thank you. Kristen, thanks for inviting me to the session. I am your yin, but I'm also the Canadian yin. You know, I'm from Ottawa, Canada. I've got 40 years of experience in investigation, ethics, program development, compliance, risk management. Yeah, and I've been training and helping organizations around the world in compliance, ethics, risk management, and I'm part also of the ISO community, where I'm on the Canadian committee for the ISO 42001. So I'm not just a governance nerd. I'm also a computer nerd a little bit, but never at your level, my friend. But thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, not a problem at all. I'm really excited to be hosting this series with you, good sir. And really, I think this came out of the Compliance and AI conference that was just like a month or so back in Boston, where you were speaking a little bit and I was speaking a little bit. And there were so many great conversations and questions coming out of it. And I think what still surprised me was, we're now a couple of years in, and a lot of organizations, they still don't have a really great foundation to work off of. And I think, for all intents and purposes, there's a lot of hypothetical things out there rather than practical things that organizations can start incorporating today. And I think really that's what this series is about, team, right? Everything with Cyber Judo is a labor of love and education. That means that we're not sponsoring anything. There's no ads, there's no sales gimmicks, there's no registration walls, none of that type of stuff. The objective is that deliver to you guys that real world practitioner guidance, the tips and the tricks and all that type of stuff. And again, we really encourage you guys that throughout these series that we're going to have going on over the next couple months, every other week, that add your questions and comments into LinkedIn Live, into YouTube Live, and we can help incorporate that into these sessions for you guys so that you're able to kind of like pick our brains in real time and all that kind of stuff. That being said, with the series that we have here, I'm going to actually just pull up that hyperlink for you guys as an easy reference, because I know that there's a lot of different LinkedIn live sessions that are out there. You guys can also go to this hyperlink that we have on the screen here. That'll list them all out and all the different dates. So we have beyond this session here, which is talking about who owns the AI adoption process and the risks around it and building an AI Tiger team. We have sessions about buying versus building, which will bring a lot of interesting surprises, I think, for folks as we go to have that conversation. Hunting down shadow AI will be after that. continuing forward from that will be deploying the right culture and technical control. So I think that's going to be, again, another really cool yin yang type of session. And then we'll dive in a bit to the cybersecurity meat and potatoes with breaking AI before the real bad guys do, and AI red team testing and all that. And then finally wrapping up everything with one cohesive roadmap for you guys, helping address any other odds, ends, questions for everyone so that you guys feel that moving forward, you have confidence in your AI adoption process as it relates to governance, security, and compliance. So with that being noted, I'm going to actually jump right in with, I think, a refresher for everyone. So I think many of us are already kind of aware of what the AI risk landscape looks like. And I think as organizations have been adopting and leveraging and utilizing AI, they have certain items that come more to the forefront than others. And there's a lot of different elements that, as we're trying to build an AI tiger team, that we need to get the stakeholdership of everyone. There's legal and regulatory implications as we're building out an AI program. There's considerations of what do we do from a cybersecurity standpoint if AI is used against the firm? You know, a hacker breaks into somebody's account. Now they ask, you know, the AI agent, hey, can you collect for me all this information, all these social security numbers, passport numbers, all that kind of stuff? So using AI for living off the land attacks. There's external threats that we're all aware of with now AI, hackers having more sophisticated social engineering campaigns, deep fake attacks, those deep fake being impersonating people's faces and voices in real time and all that. But also the considerations around, you know, where our data lives. And, you know, at the end of the day, when organizations think about security and governance and compliance and building their business, we've had it where we think about the edge being the network, or the edge being the end devices, or the edge being users, or the cloud. In reality, the edge for our organization is the data. So how are we governing the access to the company's data, especially where AI is involved? Now, Pat, I know you work with a lot of organizations on building AI tiger teams. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important and some tips and tricks for folks to kind of kick us off?
Well, thanks. I mean, you make obviously good points here. And when you bring it down to brass tacks, because you got to break it down to something very practical. And if we look at the past in terms of ethical, legal, compliance failures, you know, a lot of listeners here are going to be understanding the fact that in the past and still now, a lot of problems come from the fact that there's a largely lack of governance, controls, and compliance failures. All these headlines that we see, all these, you know, major failures come down to people and process. Okay, and technology is advancing things at a rapid scale, and there's a lot of anxiety. As you know, you and I have talked about this whenever we talk about in various settings.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of anxiety, misunderstanding, but at the core of it, it's the people. How are people organized? And unfortunately, even before the advent of AI, agentic AI, we had problems in organization in terms of silos. People and functions were not talking to each other. Okay, they were not exchanging. There was like competition sometimes, or they didn't have the right tool, the right communication framework. So in the past, where I was investigating all of this and helping organization, you know, build their capacity to be more effective for risk management, the biggest problem was those silos, that they were not a cross-functional team just to deal with the existing risks that were existing before AI. Now, with the advent of AI, it's increased the risk profile. The risk landscape has increased because of AI, and the deployment, how people are just rushing in to adopting AI without a plan, without a strategy, and really without communicating within every function within the organization. So that layer of risk is now multiplied, because really, you know, lots of people that I've talked to says, "Oh no, AI is going to solve our problems. AI, it's absolutely fantastic." So they've got this misunderstanding of what AI is all about, And they think that AI is going to fix their bad governance or poor culture. But really, the reality is that AI is going to amplify what is already not working within the organization. And the big thing is a lack of cross functionality. So when we talk about cross functional model, and if you can move on to the next slide, just to illustrate where we are really trying to advocate, is the necessity now to really have cross-functional team for AI governance that improves not just the AI governance itself, but the entire organization in terms of policies, in terms of culture. Because AI is throughout the organization, it's affecting every single function. From the CEO to the clerk, everybody is rushing in to use AI for automation or others. But there's a misunderstanding. There's misalignment.
Yeah.
There's a lack of understanding in terms of AI literacy, AI competency at the top level, at the board level, and at the functional practical level. And to really address those gaps, we can't look at the past where in the past, with the traditional software tools, it was just deployed by IT, people were using it, but there's still organization that you and I have worked with and that we've seen, they are adopting, the next best model or the next best AI tool with lots of promises, but
Yeah.
without real plan, without real function as to where is it going to be applied, how is it going to be applied, how is it going to be monitored, and in terms of use cases, in terms of testing. So this is where we advocate now a cross-functional AI governance model that brings all the functions together, that has real practical terms in the context
Yeah.
of having that discussion, so that when you apply whatever tools, it goes through that tiger team. The tiger team for me is where there's greater communication, greater cooperation, greater collaboration, but also greater accountability
Mm.
about the selection, the deployment, and the testing of AI tools.
So,
Because
so
go ahead.
just real brief for me actually. So, tiger teams was like a new term for me. As talking with folks and whatnot. Maybe just in like a brief 60 seconds, can you describe like what a tiger team is and how that brings everyone together?
Well, a tiger team really is made up of all the major functions, all the leaders of major functions. Now, what I advocate, and honestly I'm biased about it, is that the orchestrator, the leader of this, it's not that he or she or the function will be responsible for everything, but they'll be the orchestrator, the ethics and compliance team, because just their role, their experience in governance, in terms of compliance, they're the real good leader to bring people together. And then you've got legal, cyber audit, HR, IT, business lines, operations. All of these people are part of the team because they all have a certain level of responsibility. And we're going to go into the RASI a little later on. But what's important here is the team would be accountable and responsible for the deployment, the testing, to make sure that things are working well within the organization. Okay, so it doesn't sit, AI governance should not sit with just one function. Because of how it impacts the entire organization, it should be well coordinated, well-oiled machine, but that has an overarching responsibility for the organization. And then you have greater accountability and you have the proper metrics to be able to, have cybersecurity by design type of approach, and governance by approach.
So one of the things that I've noticed actually with helping like build out tiger teams and that kind of stuff is also starting with the leadership team first, right?
Yes.
And understanding what you're trying to get out of building a really good AI governance strategy. So yeah, as someone who has built multiple businesses and all that kind of stuff, I've usually kind of been the type of person where I think like 80% of a business can really be distilled down into like a spreadsheet. What's happening? What's the inputs? what's the outputs, who's responsible, what's the cadence of that particular task, right? There's a lot of components to a business that really fit into that model, right?
Yes.
And so, when we think about, having a cross-functional team, it really is also about understanding kind of the flow down of the activities of your business, how your business works, where your data lives, and all that type of stuff. And so the first element I always like to start with folks is just like really breaking it down of like, hey, a large language model, that's kind of like an educated mind. What's retrieval augmented generation, right? It's just looking something up from a data source that the AI wasn't originally trained off of. So that could be the internet. That could be our information. It might be in SharePoint. That might be a PDF that we just upload in one chat session with Claude or something like that. Then we have these connections. These are the deeper elements of being connected to Microsoft 365 or our customer relationship management system and all that. And when we combine that together with thinking about the processes that occur in our business, hey, wait, that's a checklist that I go through. This is how I do, let's say due diligence on a firm. We look at this type of data that's here. We look for these types of things. These are the red flags. These are the pitfalls that we always try to consider for. This is how we score and evaluate those things. And if you can break down a process into a checklist, almost that is like for a new employee that's joining your business, that is something you can put into an AI, right?
Yes.
And what you need to do is build out kind of like custom skills that are going to be using your organization's data, that's going to be using your organization's curated to your specific processes. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be setting up your team for failure if you say, hey, everyone, here's Claude or here's ChatGPT.
You can't just plug it in.
Yeah, and just be productive with it. At the end of the day, if you have Sally over here who is asking Claude to help them perform some type of, let's say, help me generate an IC memo, an investment committee memo or something like that, and then you have John do the same thing, you're going to get completely different results when you're not using all the appropriate data connectors, when you haven't curated the skills, and then setting your skills up to actually use like your company's like templates, right? That has your cover page, your footer, your header, all of that. You want to have things that are going to be a predictable process. And so that really starts with the leadership team and then flowing down to directors and heads of different departments and teams of being able to define their process and understand where their data lives and what tools do they use. Organizations are not going to be set up for success in adopting AI if they don't have those foundational elements in place, or we're starting to build those foundational elements, right? I also will note that I think that in this whole process of working with like leadership teams and helping them identify key business goals that they want to achieve with AI, helping set the right expectations. I think that a lot of times people are not aware that AI is not like some magic silver bullet, and that in reality, when you go to have AI process something, you can't just throw 200 documents at it and expect it to eat that up and then be accurate with a response. So you have to, if you're trying to do certain activities like that, then that means that you need to take your process, step back, and break it down into smaller chunks, other AI agents for other skills to work off of, and making sure that you're being considerate, that you're not trying to, at the end of the day, if you're trying to dig a hole in the ground in your backyard and you find a rock, is this a small stone or is this a really big boulder? So as you kind of dig around it, you have to really think, if I'm starting to see a boulder, then you need to get a pickaxe and you need to start breaking that down into smaller stones rather than let me go try to pull in a crane and just pull the whole thing up out of the ground. So I think I've made a pretty good case from like a business process automation standpoint for folks, why this type of thing is really important for departmental leaders and all that kind of stuff. Pat, you brought up the RASI elements. Would you be able to dive in a little bit further for the team on that?
Yeah, please. And if you know, what's important for people to remember is that we can't have the same process we used before for traditional software tools. Agentic AI, the pace and scope of the changes related to AI adoption and AI models is, every 6 weeks there's something new, if not sooner. So we can't use the process of the past in terms of developing processes or policies, taking months to draft it, to approve it, to deploy it. By the time it's deployed, you're already, two models behind. Yeah. So you need to be much more agile, much more robust, much more responsive. And so that's why that that cross-functional team, that Tiger team, is more able to adapt right on the fly as opposed to the old process and the old system. Okay, so you got to remember here that you have to adapt to the technology, and technology has to adapt to your processes. So it's a different way of doing business, and we need to look at how we train our people as well within that Tiger team. What type of tools, what type of responsibility, what type of accountability, what the metrics and the KPIs. So in terms of RASI, if you can bring it back to that, it's who's accountable at this? Because really the CEO, the board, they need to be on board with this in terms of support.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to build a business case. You need to be able to give them the tools and the right metrics for them to support you and give you the okay to build a Tiger team, but also support you in terms of the training and supervision and how you deploy things.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of responsibility, everybody has to have a responsible and accountable framework. So the CTO, model development and deployment, the CIO would be infrastructure and system.
Yeah.
The business units, the use case, ownership, because it's about the use case and the workflows. Security is the testing and control and the risk, and compliance and legal is about governance and regulatory alignment. So they're the people, the team responsible and accountable for this. But the accountability is shared throughout the organization where other people are also consulted within the RASI. So that's the subject matter experts and the end users, your internal stakeholders, the users themselves. It's not just about, deploying it, plugging it in, says, here, use it. How is it impacting their workflows? Is it properly, justified? Where is your assessment from the baseline, and is it improving? Is AI actually improving, their workflow and improving their effectiveness? So how do you measure that? Unless you have this plan and strategize and supervised by this Tiger team, it's really hard to get a proper picture of it because there's so many elements. And of course, informed is at the board of directors. You keep the board of directors informed in terms of those metrics.
You were talking about a little bit earlier the concepts around the culture and the training. Would you be able to dive into that a little bit further?
Yeah, that's a key element. If you look at the training that we have in the past or today, who remembers now and love the once a year, ethics to compliance or code of ethics training that everybody hated? You'd rather get your tooth pulled than going through the training. Okay, so with the advent of AI, we need to change the way we do business because the people themselves, the key element, the key risk factor is not just simply the technology. That's absolutely there. And that's why you need, a proper framework for AI governance and cybersecurity. What's really is the human element that is the highest risk. It's the end user. And if you don't provide them the right framework, the right training, elevate their competency, elevate their literacy, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. Where shadow AI usage, data mishandling, blind trust, people are using AI now. If you think that in your organization, I have a perfect picture of who's using what, you're probably wrong because there's people using it because the pressure to perform is there. And even if you have a policy of you're just using, Microsoft or you're just using Claude or whatever, they're probably using something else if you haven't provided the right framework, the right training, the right tools for them to really understand the nature of the risk and how they can really benefit from it. Because, AI, you can't just plug it in. You need to understand. It's like giving the keys to a Formula One car to an employee and expect them they're not going to crash and burn because, you just can't do that.
100%.
Okay. So what's important here is understanding that you need to understand what the role with the workflow is. How is the AI going to be able to, basically answering two questions. How is it going to help me in my job? And why should I care about this? If you can answer those two questions and provide them the right level of training, the right level of support, the right level of of assets and tools for them to really take advantage of the benefits of AI, people are going to be feeling the anxiety, and this is where you're going to have a lot of problems because they don't know how to use it. They don't know how to manipulate. And there's a lot of anxiety in terms of my job's going to be taken over. Well, you need to have that knowledge base, and the knowledge base is based for me. It's not just generic training;
Yeah.
it's function-based training. How is it going to help me in my job? And do I have the opportunity to play and experiment in a sandbox? Do I have access to AI champions that can guide me? Do I have access to libraries of prompts or examples that I can really associate and embed into my workflow?
I really like the different profiles that you highlighted here, and certainly I've had the experience of working with other organizations where there's like these kind of focus group sessions with sitting down with like this department and team and this department and team and communicating and the lingo and focusing on the workflows that matter to their
Yep.
department and what they're doing day in and day out, and then helping like educate them, addressing their questions, and then from there that kind of sets a good expectations on the limitations, the governance, the usage, and then having kind of like those different leaders from those different like focus groups or departments then coming together to help kind of like support the center of excellence or the tiger team.
Yeah,
That you said,
yeah,
right?
and we got to change the way we used to provide training, Christian, because it's no longer the once a year thing. It's got to be on continuous basis, micro training, like could be 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Having access to a library so that they can upskill themselves, they can get more opportunities. Okay, but really, it's how do you provide them the tools and the confidence to leverage AI effectively, so that they're not scared of it. You've got different skill sets within the organization. It's just fine,
Yeah.
but you can't just have training and expect them to work. You need to have it needs to be associated to a communication strategy, so
Mm.
that you can really says, hey, look at what a Christian has developed for his workflow. Can you guys apply it? And it's accessible to people. People can really experiment and say, hey, wow, I can apply that to mine. So now it becomes a collaborative effort. It's really a shared responsibility, and this is where the Tiger team plays a role in terms of communicating and sharing this and promoting it. So now it doesn't become oh my God, I'm scared of this, or how am I going to be evaluated with this? No, it is embedded within the culture that everybody has a role to play in upskilling themselves and really benefiting from the technology.
You make a really good point to that. I would say that in my professional experience, working with a lot of different focus groups and teams, and sitting down with compliance and human resources and business operations, one of the biggest pitfalls that I see from like an education standpoint is also folks being aware that this is an environment where there is regulation, and that regulation is going to continue to grow. Right. I think that throughout the U.S. right now, it's a bit of a patchwork. There's nothing at like a federal level. Mm-hmm. There's different states that have, as you guys can see here on screen, different types of legislation that are either in the pipeline, or they're coming up, or they're already here today. But the key aspects for folks to be aware of is that when you're sitting down, you're having these conversations with compliance and legal law and kind of stuff, is to think about one, what industry are you operating in? Who are your customers? Who are your stakeholders? Who do you have obligations to? And how that intersects potentially with transparency, and how you're leveraging AI to deliver those types of services to your customers, to your stakeholders, and all that. And then also the aspect of how you're using AI as it relates to maybe certain functions of human resources throughout the business, particularly around talent acquisition, hiring new people, thinking about managing employee performance and measuring for employee performance. So folks should certainly be aware that depending on what they're doing, where they're operating, what industry they're in, that those are going to be things that they want to kind of dive into further with their compliance and legal team. By the way, this slide is some tips and tricks here. I am not a lawyer. Okay, this is not legal advice beyond the fact of the legal advice being go talk to your counsel, right? But that's important to start have that conversation with your counsel, with your compliance team, saying, these are operational aspects of what you were thinking about using AI. Does that align with the laws and regulations that apply to us today? I'd also say that another big aspect to this is firms being aware about the EU AI Act, because the EU AI Act, even if your firm doesn't have a physical headquarters or presence in the EU, depending on what types of customers you have, what types of partners and relationships you have, the EU AI Act may still apply to your firm. It's extraterritorial. That's kind of like a little bit like GDPR. It's extraterritorial, and punishments, fines, and not following, the law, right, could have an impact to the firm, even though you're not trying to directly operate in the EU. So there's just a lot of different considerations there on what you're doing, how you're doing it, what it might be classified by the EU AI Act, on if that's a high risk activity or not. And then also, where do we need maybe transparency that's going to be put in place for any type of customers or stakeholders that we have in the EU, right?
Yeah.
So Pat, kind of continuing this bit of a theme of empowering organizations in their AI adoption process, I frequently hear about this kind of somewhat of a myth that many folks think that governance and quick AI adoption are like at odds with one another. Would you be able to provide, some of your takes on that, some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And if I can just add a little bit on what you say, one of the things that crosses over all regulatory framework, including ISO 42001, is that you need to have a governance structure that you can show and you can demonstrate that it's effective. And it's actually now that much more important because insurance companies, underwriters, in terms of liability, because of all the problems that AI can bring, are requiring this, and you may lose your coverage or not be covered if you can't demonstrate that you have a governance structure that is effective. Okay, and when you talk about governance, for ethics and compliance, and I've heard it for decades now, is if we put in this governance and the policy, it's going to slow our business down. The ethics and compliance function is the office of no. We can't innovate. We can't, which is for me absolute bullshit. Because really, when you talk about governance, it's about having just a guardrails and framework for you to operate safely, responsibly. Okay. And when you talk about governance, proper governance, especially in AI, because of the pace and scope of the changes, you need to be agile. You need to be able to have a process that adapts very, very quickly to the evolution of that technology. And if you don't build it from the start, if you don't build it by design, cybersecurity and governance by design, this is where you're going to fail miserably. It's not if it's going to fail, it's when. And you're going to crash and burn. And the reality of proper governance policy is that it allows you to upscale and to be innovative and to actually make more profit more quickly. Because, going back to the Formula One car, what allows drivers to go at enormous speed is that they know that their controls, the safety features are working. Their tires not going to go off the rail. Their brakes are going to be working, all the safety cage, so that they're allowed now to operate with confidence, with safety, so they can upscale themselves. They can go fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so proper governance is not slowing down. It's just it gives you the boundaries. Operate within these boundaries and go fly. Be innovative. Be creative. Okay?
It's almost like with proper governance in place, it's being organized, and we have when you're organized and people know the order of operations and working together, they're more likely to get shit done.
But that's just it. And they have clarity. They're not guessing. Oh my God, am I going to be getting shit on because I'm not sure, because it's not clear. If you've got clear expectation, clear accountability, it's not having policies that are 50 pages, okay, but it's clear and it's practical, then people will just go for it.
So I've heard a lot of people use these terms that I think sometimes can be a little bit overused and bullshitty. They'll say compliance by design, or security by design, or governance by design. And and forgive me for my French here. It's like, well, what the hell does that mean anyways? Like, be specific. And so
Yes.
I think that if I was going to give any quick tips or tricks or like highlight a very specific moment in this conversation, at least items I was talking about, this is I think where I would focus, people's attention, which is some practical and specific examples. Are a lot of these AI solutions that you use allow you to define organization-wide like system prompts. So you can be specific of what types of data to interact with, what's the voice, what's the who should a staff member reach out to if they have an AI compliance security question, and having that automatically communicated to them in the chat. Those are all little facets that can make your life a lot easier. Yep. Same thing with, when you're bringing all your teams together and everyone starts to ideate and oh my God, we can do this and we could do that. Then you start to face a flood of everyone saying, I want this skill. I want this skill. I want AI to do this. And I want AI to do that. Well, let's take the opportunity of building out like a form where we can ask our employees, hey, what are you looking to do with AI?
Yeah.
Okay, where is it going to get the initial data? Okay, what do you want the outputs to look like? Do you got any example templates? Mm-hmm. Do you want the AI to actually automatically have it in this specific PowerPoint template on your behalf, so that you don't have to copy and paste text in and out of Claude and then go throw that into a Microsoft PowerPoint document, right? Yep. But also, as folks start to play more with AI, staff will get, I think, comfortable starting to build their own skills. Hey, look at this. I made this. I made that. And that's great. I love people's enthusiasm, but also something that can help accelerate the process with governance and security and compliance by design kind of baked in is we can actually build like our own curated company skill creator.
Yeah.
Hey, our company works in this industry. We serve these types of customers. We provide these types of services. Here's what our typical tools are. Here are kind of some of the typical processes that we perform across our business. That element makes the skill creator 1,000 times more powerful. Absolutely. And now what you're doing is, governance and security and compliance by design is really just all about, rather than someone having to read a policy document and follow the policy, that they are guided by an invisible hand of controls and processes. So when you put in the skill creator, hey, yeah, these are the types of data that are off limits. These are the types of things, that we can and can't do. These are the types of risks that we want to call out when someone invokes a skill creator. Those are all elements that you can now have baked in, where you don't always have to tell somebody. You don't always have to rely on them being able to remember verbatim the AI security policy or whatever it may be, right? And then that last element, I think of, people are talking about all their data, where their data lives, and they're trying to figure out like, hey, I don't want AI to interact with this and interact with that. A lot of times, a lot of firms, they'll have something like Microsoft 365. They'll have entitlements to solutions like Microsoft Purview that can help them with information governance of what type of data gets exposed to our AI agents that are connected to their enterprise, right? And so those are all some just kind of like easy examples and tips and tricks for our folks here to kind of take away and say, hey, you know what? Rather than just dictating something in a policy, let's bake it into what we're building here. And now, considering the fact of like what people are building, what would be some of the big takeaways, Pat, that you would want to leave people with?
Well, what I think it's important here is that people need to understand that we got to move from just efficiency AI to opportunity AI, and looking at building this from the ground up, but iteratively. Don't look at it as let's plug it in and go company wide right away. Start small. Start with high risk, okay, low impact, like GIF entertainment or whatever. Okay, that you use cases so you can really test it and go and be innovative, be creative with it. But the thing is, you need to document. You need to be able to have metrics. What's your baseline? Where do you start from? To be able to show the actual benefits and the improvements and the 4x or 5x productivity gains that you get from it. So that now you're going to be able to show the senior managers and the boards is this is how we're going to be able to scale it up. Okay. Yeah. So take the time to really have the baseline, to build that infrastructure, and to build a foundation of ethics and compliance and governance so that you can scale up, effectively and safely. And having those boundaries, people can innovate to their heart's content because they'll have some safety protocol. They'll have, the guardrails to be able to operate, and they'll know that it's not going to break down the house. They're not going to crash and burn.
Yeah.
So now you're going to have a whole bunch of people that will become not only literate, but efficient and be champions that will scale up the efficiency of the organization. And that's profitability, that's productivity.
Yeah.
That's really engaging the entire organization.
Well, I'm super excited about us being able to dive deeper and deeper in across the webcast series that we have coming up here. And I know we're just about at time here, team. But first and foremost, Pat, good sir, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
For the thoughtful advice, tips, and tricks for the listeners here. Again, I'm super excited about co-hosting the rest of these AI masterclass, over the next about 3 months or so. And for our listeners here, as we wrap up, just some things to call out for you guys. Continue to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. There is going to be a plethora of open source content and insights and tools that we're helping build for folks, things that are not tied to like, oh, go register for that or go buy this thing. Or it's a labor of love of providing insights for folks. Our next session that's going to be coming up essentially 2 weeks from now is going to be around buy versus build AI, the vendor risks that no one wants to own. So that's going to have some very, I think, insightful and surprising content for folks. And as a reminder for everybody, we have, again, already some content out there. Pat and myself, we created this AI policy generator here. Doesn't collect any details, runs in your client-side browser code and all that. So it helps you get an initial foundation. Pat and myself, we're going to still have a bunch of other content that's coming out over the next couple of days here. And then also, if you guys just need that reference again for the masterclass series, that's up on the screen. So that all being called out, team, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We're looking forward to diving into more of these soon. Keep the questions coming, keep the comments coming. And thank you so much for your time. Stay safe and secure. Bye now.
Take care.